the record. There we go. And we'll jump to the next slide. So I'm going to read this almost verbatim because usually Mark would be here, but Mark is away today. But just to give you a brief introduction of what AACRAO Transfer and Articulation Community of Practice is and what it stands for, I'll read verbatim. With an increased student mobility comes a greater demand for our community to come together to support each other in the often complex and varied world of transfer. In response to this demand, AACRAO's TNA committee is hosting an open community of practice call where any member of the AACRAO community can engage to discuss current issues or trends related to transfer credit, PLA, or articulation. And the goals to this forum are to create a shared space where members of this community can engage in transfer topics or the handling of unique scenarios, and to create connections with other members of the transfer community, which can be used as a phone and friend resource, in the future. So again, we really encourage you guys to use that chat feature to engage with one another, to network, and we're hoping that this provides you a space to not only share the frameworks around what your institutions do with TNA, but also to learn from other people's frameworks as well. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass that mic back to Jamerson, who's going to start with some of the overhead topics that we're going to discuss today.
Hello, everyone, again. When we were asked about, providing our outlook on how we do transfer credit practices at Trident Technical College, for simplicity, we have broken down our transfer credit evaluation process into the following topics: receiving official transcripts into the college, entering previous coursework to student records, and evaluating and researching courses for equivalency, which then ends with student advising sessions. I will also touch on how we handle credit by examination, other prior credit requests, and international and military transcripts. Next slide. All transfer credit evaluation activities start with the admissions office, and they are the department that handles all document intake for students, with the exception of military transcripts that I will discuss later. And our school uses the ERP Ellucian colleague for entering and updating student records, and we use SoftDocs eTree for a document management system for both file repository and electronic forms processing. Admissions receives transcripts, verifies transcripts are official, uploads them, and adds a received date in the student's academic record. And they also handle notifications to students regarding missing transcripts. Next slide. On the following day's automated daily report, our unit will review the report for new transcripts to add to our queue. Our transfer credit specialists will then check the institution codes for new transcripts, communicates any discrepancies with the admissions office, and begins entering these new transcripts. The specialist enters the receive code, which triggers an automated email to students, letting them know that our office received the transcript. Next slide. As the specialist enters the transcript, some course data will appear if we have evaluated the specific courses from that school before. Our coordinators would then run, at the same time, an exception report showing what courses still need to be evaluated. We use higher education directory, depending on whether we can obtain accurate contact information for schools or to verify the school's calendar, whether it's quarter or semester. And we also use Transfer Evaluation System, TES, online for reviewing course descriptions based on appropriate catalog year. These determinations for courses are made while checking against our current catalog's course descriptions or from department head guidance. Once all courses are evaluated, we add an evaluated code to notify the student that their evaluation is complete. And if students feel a course is not evaluated properly, we are able to start an appeals process where the student can furnish an appropriate syllabi or syllabus for that school's catalog year for the department head to review. Next. Students can meet with their academic advisors to discuss applicability at this point, because they're now at the advising stage, regarding certain transfer credit to be used toward their academic program. Our school allows course substitutions where transfer credit may apply at the approval of the program's dean. Next slide. Our office also handles credit by examination and other prior credit requests. Credit by examinations include AP, CLEP, IB, Excelsior, and Dantes DSST. The score sheets usually come in the mail, and our unit will scan them, and then our coordinators will, with the original copies, will enter the scores. For prior credit requests, these come in the form of what we call credit for experiential learning. These come from our program deans once they are approved, and coordinators will enter those before uploading those approval forms to eTrieve. Next slide. Now, with international and military transcripts, these are handled differently because these documents must be routed for course evaluation recommendations ad hoc in a sense. Course equivalencies are not in our database. So in these cases, we will send these to the department heads or deans. Of course, this depends on which one. So with international transcripts, first we the coordinators verify whether or not that these were evaluated by an NACES approved credential evaluator. And if we run into a concern where we're not quite sure if this is actually one of the approved ones, we will reach out to the international admissions unit in our admissions office to kind of get confirmation that that is the case before we move forward with routing the transcript, or reviewing and routing it. So then usually in those cases, we will look to see what applicable course subjects we are looking at, and then we will provide a link to the transcript and route it to the relevant deans for review and providing recommendations. When it comes to military transcripts, though, these are handled differently as well, because in this case, we are actually handling the intake process for those, because the coordinators will have access to the JST website for joint service transcripts, and we will download those, review them, and depending on the applicability of coursework, we will route those to the appropriate department heads for recommendation and review. And when we do that, we will provide them with a sample or template military credit worksheet that they will enter any recommendations they may have, and then we will receive those from the department head and enter those in on the student's record and then apply that to their record. So next slide. So one of the things we were discussing at one point when we were thinking about the processes was maybe we needed to generate a discussion on what things we run into, and the things that came to mind were some challenges. And some of the challenges that happen in the course of this work that I have come across in my experience involve like students questioning equivalencies. I'm sure we all had that, where they'll have questions about how score or a course has been evaluated. And then of course, in that case, I will immediately just initiate a appeal request so that the department head can provide any guidance whether or not they have concerns about learning outcomes not being covered in a course or something like that. But usually I will tell the student it would really help if you could provide us with a course syllabi so that we can have them see what all the learning outcomes are so they can really make a good decision on this. Another challenge would be sometimes we may have some data entry errors or discrepancies, or if a scanned transcript has got a weird scan and maybe the corner of it that may have a grade on it, or something related to the legend may not be there or not clear, then we'll have to go back and rescan it, and that can add on a day or so of processing when it comes to evaluating the transcript. Another thing that comes to mind for challenges is when we have peak times, and there's times where we have a high volume of incoming transcripts, and trying to handle that when we are having to deal with like the beginning of an academic semester. Now, the other challenge could also be where we have to wait for guidance from the department heads when it comes to, hey, here are some course descriptions that I have some questions about. What are your thoughts on these? And then it can take some time because they're obviously teaching and they're also trying to maintain a department head. And I think another one I think I had listed was course substitution opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, our school does allow these. And sometimes what will happen is a student will come and ask, hey, this course I took, couldn't this course really cover this component? And I'll look and I'll go, this might be a good candidate for a course substitution. You'll need to talk to your advisor about initiating that process. At least in our school, we have to start with the admission, the academic advisor doing that. And then from there, they can probably see if they can, the program dean will be okay with that course being used as a substitute for that component in the program. But ultimately, the other big issue would be outdated equivalencies, whether or not a course that has been in the system and maybe the school decides to change the actual course to a completely different course using the same course number, or the course has a different value for how much they're offering that course, whether it went from 3 credit hours or 4 credit hours to 3 or 4 to 3, you know, that kind of thing. That means that we have to update the database all the time to make sure that we have consistency when it comes to equating some of these courses depending on when the course was taken. And at the end, I just wanted to point out that in our capacity here at Trident Tech, our evaluation process, we try to be the student's best advocate as possible while adhering to policy. We try to see what ways we can help the student with their approach to their goals, but kind of looking at what they have and seeing what can work and what their avenue might be. But ultimately, there may be cases where we may not be able to because the student's coursework just does not meet the equivalency.
Absolutely. And I actually want to take a quick break because I do see that there are a few questions that are really pertinent to your
Sure.
slide there. Nicole asked, how are the emails sent to students once the evaluations are complete? Is it automated somehow using Colleague or some other method?
To answer that question, we use automated emails. Once we put the codes in, we run a, what is that report? It's like a processing a correspondence batch. And when that happens, the certain codes will get pulled and then those will send out automatically to the student's record. And it's basically a boilerplate. It doesn't really indicate which school. It just says that the registrar's office has like basically received your transcript. And then when we evaluated it, we'll send another message saying, this is this core that the student's transcript has been evaluated. Now, for us, when we put those codes in the system, we do put notes as to which school that we evaluated on that given day or at that moment. So if we need to look back on the date when the email went out to correspond with which one went in, we can see if maybe a student has several transcripts that, oh, this was the transcript we were reviewing from College of Charleston, and that way we'll kind of have an idea.
Absolutely. And Laura did ask a follow-up question to that, asking, is the appeal process automated? And you kind of answered this in your last question, or is it done all by email?
Usually what happens is I'll get an email. There have been times where I'll have to come up to the counter and I'll explain to the student, okay, so you're disputing this course, and I'll go like, well, in this case, what we'll have to do is if you can get me a syllabi, or what I can do is pull the course description, I will send it to the department head, and I will do this manually. I'll go ahead and send it out. Usually I will go to TES, get the course description. If I can get the syllabus from the student, that'll help, or I'll hold it and wait to get that. And then I will provide that to the department head, explain what it came in as already, and then so they'll have an understanding. And if I have any editorial thoughts related to that, like maybe I'm looking at this course description and I'm saying, I don't see certain learning outcomes here that I know is a trigger for you when it comes to what you want to give credit for, but what are your thoughts on this? And then here's the learning outcomes here that I think highlight this, but it's not in the course description, and that kind of might help them to make a decision.
Definitely. And I do want to open the floor briefly because we're actually ahead of schedule. Dr. Davis, if you guys want to chime in and discuss the processes for communicating and whether automation or email is used at your respective institutions, yeah, please feel free to hop on the mic.
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to join in there. We use Salesforce for a lot of our processes and automations. So when we're evaluating credit, there's a pretty robust Salesforce process where we'll pull in as soon as a student has completed their admissions record. So we've gotten all their transcripts digitized, OCR, the works. Our transfer evaluator will perform the evaluation in that Salesforce product. And that automatically creates a PDF and an email to both the student and the enrollment counselor. So they get those artifacts first in, first out. And then if a student wants to appeal, there's another Salesforce process where they have a conversation with the enrollment counselor. That enrollment counselor will give them kind of a heads up of, getting that syllabus in, or possible common FAQs of why that credit wasn't accepted. And if they want to proceed with an appeal, the enrollment counselor selects appeal evaluation. That sends a case to the student to fill out, where they can fill in or attach that syllabus or give detailed information about how that course really does apply. And then we resolve that in the SRM Salesforce.
Oh, and I'll say, for us, it's also automated. We use Banner to communicate to the students in terms of when the transcript or the academic history is complete. And I will say, in terms of the appeals process, we do something a little bit different. In terms of it does go to the department head, so that part is the same, but we do the students will use their academic advisor to go through a petition process still needing to provide a syllabus if they request it. But if not, then we will provide at least the academic information. We also use tests, or we'll just look up the course information so that students can use that to appeal. And I will talk about that because that is one of our challenges too. How that whole thing works and timeliness and things like that. So.
And I think that's a good segue. I do say there are a few more questions in the chat, but again, we will have a bit more time to dive in and answer these questions with our panelists. Carrie also chimed in and shared what she does at their respective institutions, so it's worth going into the chat if you haven't already. But without further ado, I think I've said that like 6 times now. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to Dr. Davis, who has a handful of slides that should actually cover some of the questions that are already in that chat there. So Dr. Davis, thanks for being here with us.
Oh, no, thank you. This has actually been fun. I'm excited to talk about it. And it's actually kind of fun to see the similarities, regardless of institution. There are some things I think in higher ed we just do similarly or the same. And so I'll tell you a little real quick. So the Transfer Center here at University of Tennessee, it is within undergraduate admissions, and it includes the transfer recruitment team, but it also includes the evaluation team, which is often in the registrar's office. So the Transfer Center actually does the work from the recruitment of the prospective student all the way through getting the academic history complete for our students. So I think that it's a little bit different in terms of our application management. When we do get transcripts from our students, the undergraduate, we have an application management team that takes care of basically receiving the transcript, be it by mail or electronic, scanning it, indexing it, and then uploading it. We use Slate and we use Banner. And I'm sorry, uploading it into Slate and OnBase, not Banner. And OnBase is our document storage system. So the student does get the communication in terms of if something is missing, and that is automated through Slate. And that's something that our enrollment management communications team, they build the communication, work with application management in terms of timing, the language, the messaging, and then the coding within, of course, Slate, to target those particular students. And we do use a 7-day cycle. And I tell students and families up front, we like to communicate a lot. So you will get the same email every 7 days until we get what it is that we need. So just be prepared for that. And that's a student, whether they're awaiting submission, awaiting materials, awaiting payment, or even once admitted, awaiting confirmation. And we're very communicative. I'll put it that way. You can go to the next slide. So in terms of the evaluation team, like I said, we evaluate the transcripts. We do use OnBase, and then from OnBase using OCR, and that will eventually feed into Banner, which is where the academic history work is completed. In terms of our evaluation, we don't use a report as much. We don't use a report as much as our evaluators are going in there daily, and then they're going in looking for the students that need to be evaluated. We do prioritize our confirmed students because we know that those are students who are coming. In addition to the confirmed students, then we also focus on our graduating seniors. We have our students who are taking a summer class, and sometimes we'll wait until the semester that they're graduating to have that transcript sent in to us to be evaluated, but we will prioritize those students so that they can go ahead and complete their graduation audit so they can walk, and then admitted students. And I will say I love my evaluation team. They have been working really hard to get through confirms and into admitted students, because we also know transfer students are shoppers, and a lot of them want to know how their academic history looks before they confirm. And so we try to move quickly to get that information onto an academic history. And again, they receive an email letting them know when their academic history is complete. Now that email actually comes from Banner as opposed to Slate. So that's one of the few emails that are automated out of Banner and not Slate. I think eventually we'll work through to have that communication go through Slate as well. But it's a coding and a push into systems. thing, which is outside of my wheelhouse. And I will leave that with OIT to figure out. And same thing. So we're reviewing for accreditation. We're looking for graduation. We're looking for hours. We are looking for types of courses. There are some courses where we can automatically, if it's composition one is typically composition one, unless the department head has said, no, they're not quite meeting the course content, which is not often. So some of those basic courses, intro to psych, intro to soc, those are pretty obvious. We're able to add the equivalency without the department head. Where there is question, or where in our case, a lot of courses, if it's above where we're able to do a course for course, we will typically assign it an elective, either LD or UD, and then leave that up to the department heads to make a further determination. We'll email them and say, a student would like, is it possible that this course can be used for one of our particular courses? And it's up to them to decide. And that really is where our authority ends. If whatever department head says is where it stands. When it comes to coursework, we can go to the next one. So in terms of what happens next, those courses, again, that are not in our database, within our limited scope, we may assign an LD or UD and then forward that information to the department head to make a decision. Some of our courses, especially if it's what we now call volunteer core, which is just a new term for our general education requirements. If they fall within that range, they actually are required to go to the undergraduate committee head to make a decision on whether or not that course will meet a general education requirement versus just a regular course requirement. And so we do leave that up to them to make that decision. And whatever we determine, it goes into our transfer equivalency database. So we do have what I call a real-time equivalency database. Whatever we're using to evaluate, the public can click on that link and look up their coursework from their school and be able to see how courses will transfer to us. I feel like I repeated some of the things. Now, in terms of some of the coursework, if it comes in as an LD or UD, so one of our rules is it has to be a transferable course, at least for elective credit. If that is the case, then a student can petition if they need that course for a particular major or degree. That work goes through the academic advisor. And again, that's some of the, it can become an issue for our students because different department heads are responding in different ways. It can take some time. And it typically it won't happen until after they've confirmed, met with an advisor, they've enrolled. And so usually their first semester, they're still waiting sometimes to hear how some of those the result of the petition of their courses. So definitely one of the challenges that we have. We are working to automate that process, but it's a work in progress. And we're hoping by automating it, using a dynamic form that may speed things along, and maybe for some courses it may be a little more automatic for others. But I think the uniqueness of UT is the colleges are pretty autonomous. So most of the courses, it may apply for this particular major in this college. If a student changes a major, that course may no longer, that petition may not be applicable anymore, which is another challenge for our students because we know students change majors. So another one of those considerations. We can go to the next one. And so with the academic advisors, students do work with them. That's that whole petition process that I was talking about. One of the other things that we do in terms of students who are in our category that would be basically undecided, or it could be that they were inadmissible for competitive majors, but admissible to the university. So we have a collective program that we refer to as a university transition program. In those cases, the students actually work with an academic career and education coach, which is in our career services. They have a semester, usually up to the third day, I believe, of the following semester to declare a major. So they will work with them in terms of any petitioning courses that they need, selecting a new major, and things of that nature. So we can go to the next. And then, so the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'd be interested to see if other people are moving to this process. So because of CPOS, that course program of study, we made some changes in terms of how we place prior learning credit, military credit, APIB CLEP, all of those things. So we have a different process. We used to just go ahead and put the credit on a student's academic history. And then if at some point, especially for military, they decide they need to have that credit removed, then it was a back end process. So what we've done for course program for CPOS is our OIT was able to create a screen within Banner to where we will still enter the information as we receive it. It will not get placed on the student's academic history. It also places a flag on every student's account that an academic advisor has to remove, which means a student has to talk to an academic advisor. Academic advisor has to then give advice, add this course, don't add this course. So they're making decisions that way. Once the flag is removed, it's basically student self-service. They go into the screen, they check the boxes for the courses that they need to apply. The others will remain on that screen for them to use until they graduate. So if they get towards the end and they just need some more elective credit, they can use some of that prior learning credit that's in the screen to meet those requirements at the tail end. And that helps us avoid, if they, sophomore status or financial aid is determined on a certain number of credits, but then they go and remove credits. So it helps to address that situation. We have in 3 different places in bright red letters, this is permanent. Once you make a decision on these courses, we will not remove them. You can't come back with a story that you didn't understand. So this is permanent. We won't remove it. So that's one of our newer processes that we do all of our prior learning credit. I think that might be the last slide, isn't it? Yes, and I will say, and you mentioned like with international, we do use a third-party service with international students, and that is a requirement that they provide their transcript translated in English and a third-party service before we will evaluate that credit. But a lot of the international credit is probably more so the elective type, and they do probably more of the petition process on the back end for their courses.
Thank you. And for folks watching, we do have the contact information of all of the panelists that are joining us. So if you guys have further questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to them directly by email. And I want to go back up to, because we've got quite a bit of time for questions, which is awesome. And I want to go back to let's see, Lanisa, I hope I said that right, and Jennifer's questions, which both touch on the appeals process. So Lanisa's asking, during your appeals process, do you find that students submit a syllabi that does not match the year the course was completed? And then I also want to piggyback off that, asking, when you do need to return to departments to get their approval for the next steps to pass that student's transcript or course evaluation along and they're unresponsive, how do you move forward? And anybody, any of our panelists can jump on this one.
Sorry. For my case, when it comes to, there's not always an easy answer, but I will say this. Usually when we come into, or I deal with a situation where a department head is, I haven't received a response yet, especially after a certain amount of days, I usually use a window about 10 business days, just because it just kind of gives me something to kind of, and I'll remind myself, I'll send out a email going like, here's some course descriptions, what do you think? And then I'll flag it, say in 10 days, let me know. And then what I'll do is I'll try to do a follow-up. But after a while, I can't just let it sit there. What I'll end up doing is I can't evaluate it. So then I'll no credit for now, but I don't enter the equivalency in a database. I just no credit for now. And then what'll happen is usually then student comes back. And then when that happens, then I'll go, hey, I did put this out to the department head. It could be they may have been out. It could be going to have been really busy at the time. I can put this out, but what I would recommend is reach out to them and have that conversation, and then they can see, and that'll kind of prompt them to kind of be a little more involved, because I know that department heads are busy. I get it. So that's just a kind of a way to kind of allow another trigger. So it's not just me, it's also the student, because they're earnest in wanting to get this credit or get it looked at and to getting a serious evaluation. And that's sometimes how I handle that. That may not be the ideal, but sometimes, every situation when it comes to evaluations of courses is ideal.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything to add? Nathan, with the comment that you made about processing over 10,000, it sounds like you guys see a lot of this, and I would be interested to know what your process is at your institution.
So for the appeal process, we use a delegation and a rubric. So it's never relying on one person never taking a vacation, or one person who's just trying to launch a different program doesn't have time to necessarily respond. So we go through, there's a brief training process where the department head, faculty, director will designate 2 to 3 other people that they have trained, that they feel comfortable making that decision. And then when we send out the appeal for feedback, any one of those delegates can approve it. And that way the responsibility's shared. And that has, we probably get a response from one. It is only one needs to approve, but sometimes all 4 approve, sometimes 3 approve, but the first approval is what matters. So our response time is usually under 3 business days for any escalated appeals. But the way in which we work with faculty to define the rubrics for accepting courses really empowers the people evaluating not to have to use that escalation path too often. The guidelines are pretty verbose, and they allow us to store an incredible amount of articulation agreements at the course level. We're probably flirting with about 2.5 million to 3 million course equivalencies from 7,000 or 8,000 different institutions across the US, because we don't necessarily have a feeder school. We have thousands of feeders. Some schools will only send in 1 transcript a year, but we build equivalencies off that transcript because we're doing the research. So when the next transcript comes in, we don't really have to worry about it too much. So the appeal process is pretty streamlined when it comes to escalation and feedback. And I think it's important to have delegates in every system, just to prevent that bottleneck experience.
No, absolutely. And it sounds like it'd be beneficial for AACRAO to meet directly with you and ask about how you guys implemented that system, because I think a framework where multiple people are accountable for something as important as communicating within your team, but also communicating with your students. I mean, it is really critical to moving the process along. And with that said, Laura did have a question a couple minutes back, and she's asking more about how this is communicated to students. She's asking, are the students able to see that course information on their degree audit system? And again, anybody is welcome to jump on and answer that one.
I can speak for Trident Tech regarding that question. I usually will tell students two things, when, especially if they're asking about it being evaluated. A lot of times they send us an email from their personal, and I'm like, and I'll tell them, 1, please check your Trident Tech email address, because likely we may have sent you an automated email letting you know, 1, that we received it or evaluated it. But then I will also tell them, because the way we are set up, the student can actually go and do a program eval or degree evaluation themselves in our self-service setup in our portal, and they'll go in there for whatever program they want to look at, and it'll pull up their evaluation, and usually any extra courses that are not already automatically applied based on what it is that they got transfer credit for, especially electives or things that don't exactly fit what we offer as for a non-equivalence transfer, those will go to the very bottom. But all of the courses that directly correlate to a component will be slotted in those different slots or places under components of the program, and they can easily see that. Their advisor can definitely see that as well. But I also tell them that because of where our unofficial transcripts are, they can go look at their unofficial transcript, and it'll show a listing of transfer credit. Now, it's not going to be traceable there, but it'll give them an idea of what they've gotten credit for, especially if they had 1 school. But if they had several schools, they can see, okay, we got transfer credit from, this is all we got from these set of schools. So.
And I would say not so much our degree audit system, they can see their academic history through their portal. The degree audit system is more, it will take time once they're admitted for academic advisors to input their degree information and do that work. So I'll say we're probably a little bit slower, and we are slowly working towards having a more automated degree audit system. That's one of my, if I wave a magic wand, it could make something happen. We would have that, and then the students could do their what ifs perspective all the way through enrolled students. So one day, oh, that's my magic wand. Wish for that, but eventually, yes, they will be able to see their degree audit system.
Absolutely. And again, folks, for those of you guys watching, this is a great time to ask your questions in the chat. But while we have a second, you're gonna have to excuse me. I'm gonna make the screen a bit smaller. Oh, let's see if we can go back. I want to go back to Jamerson's challenges slide because I felt like that was a very relatable slide. I'm sure there are several challenges that all of you guys have experienced. And so it'd be really great if you would take a second in the chat just to talk about which ones that you're seeing the challenges, which challenges that you can identify with, so we can move the conversation forward in a way that really addresses the bottlenecks or the issues that you're experiencing at your own respective institutions. But I work with international at AACRAO primarily, and I am really interested to learn more about your international credit process. I know, Jamerson, you'd mentioned that you guys use NACES approved evaluation credential companies. And I'm curious to know, are these listed on the site, and how do you guys communicate that to your international incoming students who are looking to transfer to your
Absolutely. To answer your question, normally what will happen is if a student comes to one of our counters and we'll talk to them, and particularly if they explain, like, I came from a different country, or I went to school outside the United States, any sort of language related to that suggests that they would be a candidate as an international student, they're going to go, you will need to talk to our person who handles international admissions in the admissions office, and we'll direct them to there. And then that way they can reach out to our international admissions coordinator over here. And from there, they can have that discussion about what they need, because there's obviously a lot of documentation they're going to need to start that admissions process, in addition to explaining to them, because we have a little sheet. And I actually, you say that, I actually look at the sheet right now. We have a little credential evaluation procedure sheet that the student can get, and it will list what all of the NACES evaluators are. And actually, there is this page. I think there's 2 different pages on our website. I think the policy spells it out, but we actually have a page that explains that they must have one of the eligible NACES credential evaluators. So.
And we have the same, we have it listed, but I will say, and maybe if somebody else could chime in, we're debating whether we want to continue. So historically, we didn't always use the third-party service. But we're also a small but mighty team, so we have to be careful about how much work we want to take on. But it's always that discussion for some students about paying for the transcript evaluation. They are pricey. And we know with international students that you have to document that you're able to afford to come into the country. But on the front end, we are asking them to spend $200, $300 for an admissions decision. So we're debating, and so it'd be helpful to hear what other people are doing and what decisions that you're making, or is anybody using like an in-house evaluator, if you can get it translated into English to then evaluate something like that. So we're exploring for those very reasons. And then some of our international students, like those coming from Ukraine or different areas who can't get a transcript to get evaluated, and how do we work with those students, and advocate for them to still apply.
Wendy, I will chime in. At one of my previous institutions, we had that problem as well, but we did have internal professionals that what actually did evaluations for us. So that was a huge help. If they actually had the expertise, we utilized their services in-house so that students did not have to go out and pay that type of money. All institutions don't do that, but when you can, it certainly is a great service to our students. And also why I'm taking a few minutes, it talked about data entry errors and scanning issues. One of the things I like about Trident Tech is that we do scanning. And so I had an issue the other day where a student called and they were like, well, I don't see where some of my courses were evaluated. So very quickly, I was able to go into our system electronically to be able to pull up the transcript and see if there was an error and who I needed to talk to about that, getting it transcript. So it does help when you have those electronic platforms to be able to utilize relatively quickly.
Definitely.
Yeah. Accessibility on the internal side with the scanning and the technical resources that you guys have is really important, and also making it accessible, to students, both international and domestic, who are looking to have their transcripts reviewed. I think that's really, really important. I'm taking a look at the chat and I'm not seeing a lot of comments. I do want to mention that Carrie and Julie both said they require NACES approved companies as well, which is awesome. And they do also do a course by course evaluation as well. Alyssa's asking, what is your process when evaluating international transcripts and there aren't any course descriptions to reference? That's a great question.
I think that's where the third party is helpful because they do that initial evaluation on the front end, but I think that'll be a good question to answer. And anybody else chime in? I will say we're doing some work with our international recruitment team with some universities in China and different places. And so what we have done is asked for a syllabus for some of those courses. So then we can still go through the process. Yeah, so, but that can be interesting as well, just navigating internationally to get syllabus or to get a syllabus, especially where some institutions in a learning process don't even create a syllabus. And so asking them to do more work to create something that fits our format so that we can then evaluate their students has been some work that we've been doing. It's been an interesting process.
Absolutely. And to continue that conversation about international admission, I did want to re-up Dr. Davis's question about who is using third party versus who is doing in-house evaluations and what really leads you guys to make that decision. Of course, this is a good time to come off of mute. If you want to, you're welcome to raise your hand or just kind of chime in. Wendy's sharing in the chat, we do our evaluations in-house, and if we can't find a necessary course description, we'll ask for the student to provide that documentation. That is a great way to do it. I also want to plug in, while we're talking about it, our International Activities Group, which is a listserv that AACRAO offers and that I actually moderate, which is kind of fun. I'll put a link into that before the end of our session today, and you guys are welcome to sign up. And this is just an area where you can ask your questions to a host of other folks that are doing the same exact work as you guys and kind of learn from their frameworks. But to again re-up Dr. Davis's question, if you guys can offer in the chat or come off mute about your experience with that, or if you guys want to move to a different challenge area, if this is your conversation.
So at Indiana State University, we actually did have a credential. It actually used to be myself and before I moved to the registrar's office, but in the admissions office, they had recently lost their credentialer. So now they have actually moved to the third party from the NACES list, and they have seen a big decline because the students don't want to pay that upfront cost just for a decision when they're not sure that they actually want to go here. So we actually are looking to rehire someone and get them trained because we have seen such a decline going to that third party.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else is welcome to chime in as well. And while we
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so I work at Berklee College of Music, and I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because I work for their online degree program. So they have a traditional on-campus experience, and then we have a completely separate online division, which initially started as continuing education, has kind of blossomed into a lot of other things. But we have online degree programs that are completely online, so we don't deal with any sort of like international paperwork in the realm of like I-20s. So yeah, we have a lot of international students. However, we don't like issue any visas or anything like that for them to physically come to the US. That being said, we have, in part because you know, we're so accessible online, we have a lot of interest from international students. So we, within the past couple of years, made the choice to, we had been requiring applicants to go through a third party, NACE's approved credential evaluation company in order to receive their admissions decision. Came into all the same challenges, or came up against all the same challenges that everybody else is speaking to right now. Just the cost for students, and you know, we found that it did seem to be a significant barrier for a lot of our applicants, and it was something that I had done in the past, so I sort of led the charge in. We attended all of the AACRAO trainings, and got everybody up to speed on our transcript evaluation team. And the pandemic hit, and then so we had to regroup kind of quickly. But yes, we have been, for the past 2 years now, 2.5 years, we've been doing everything in-house, and it has not been without its own set of challenges. But I would say that all in all, it has been the best decision for our student population and our staff. And I'm happy to talk at length with anybody who's interested in making this transition, because I've lived it. I would be more than happy to go into all of the nitty-gritty details, but I don't need to take up any more like airtime here.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your perspective. If you don't mind just dropping your email in the chat so that people can reach out directly to you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I've also, I forgot I was sharing my screen for a second, but you probably saw me navigate away to drop that international activities group link in there as well, which is another great place for questions. I do see a handful of other questions coming in. One's from Brandy, and she is asking how much, the chat is a moving. How much is the average TCE through a third party? If anybody has a price point offhand, I'm not sure.
I would say the average seems to be somewhere between 150 and 225, depending on if you're just looking for a degree equivalency or a course by course and that sort of thing. But that's usually the ballpark figure.
Yeah, and we require course for course. So I think I've seen like the 200, 250-ish range, depending on which company they use.
Thank you.
Awesome. And Julie's asking, what school codes does everyone use when posting credits for international courses if no CEB code exists? Do you create codes for each school in your system?
In our case, we actually have a specific INS institution code. Sorry, I was about to say INSTICA, an institution code for foreign college. And what will happen is when we go and say, I get a recommendation from our deans for courses for international transcripts, I will go into that course, or not that course, on that student's record to that college, drill in and then add this course, and it's treated as an ad hoc entry. Like we wouldn't put it to the equivalency database because this is just where it's like a catch-all institution code just specifically for foreign college. In that way we can apply. But I will be honest with you, most cases when we get international transcripts, the best we can give them almost usually it's like elective courses, like that might help to cover like a situation where they may need to do a course substitution at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do the same. We create a code. I know I keep writing my wish list. Maybe if I speak it out, something will happen. But
100%. Speak it into existence. I think.
so, well, and I would say in terms of that, that is also another one of my goals, though, is to actually, I mean, our domestic equivalency database is public, and I'd like to have an international one to where the same information, and I know it's an OIT nightmare, and I get it. But that's another one of my magic wands, to be that transparent for international students as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And kind of piggybacking off of that question, when new, let's say that an international course syllabi changes, or you guys need to create a new code for a new course, what do you guys do in terms of process for making that happen and sharing that out with your team so everybody is on the same page? What's that process like at your institutions?
Just to make sure I'm clear what you're asking. So I'm guessing you're looking at another transcript from the same school, or?
Yes.
Okay, I will be honest, normally, the way we treat the international transcripts here is that we look at them as, this is like a clean slate every time, just because this student's situation is very different, because we may get a transcript or an evaluation that may have not just their high school on it, they could have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And of course, because we're a two-year school, we're only going to be able to look at the bachelor's degree portion of it. And then we got to figure and usually we just treat it as an ad hoc. So if we're going to give credit, or the dean's willing to give credit for certain courses, then we'll just go in and just put in. And usually when I do it, it's usually something like, if I have a math course, they want to give them some math credit, but it's not going to be like a specific class. It'll probably just be like some non-equivalency credit. I'll just put in like math 001, because it's separate from how we usually spell out coursework in our system. It's a little different. So then that way, when we do that individual line item and I associate it with something that we actually have here based on that approval, then it's just ad hoc. It's not like we're going back and I'm going to go in and adjust the equivalency or adjust the class in like the back end for the database.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I'll say for us, we have the same people who are doing the work. So as long as that team is aware, so we do have a specific code for each institution, but it's the same people doing the work, and nobody else should be in there messing with anything. So
Yeah, definitely. I feel like per team, you kind of have your own agreed upon language almost, where you're like, all right, nobody can come in and switch up the language because we're running off of an agreed upon terminology set. I also want to point back to the chat again. Karen, thank you for dropping those links, and she's shared a handful of links, including the naces.org/members link, as well as what looks like her respective institutions transcript evaluation outline, which is awesome. Thank you. And we do have about 3 minutes left. Again, I want to open the floor and really welcome questions that you guys have, and also point you back to our slide again, where if you guys have conversation or question that would take a little bit more time than these last 3 minutes, you can email our panelists here, or if any of our panelists have a last word statement that they'd like to offer, now is the calling time for that.
I'll throw this out here for future conversation. I would love to know how other institutions are handling one of the challenges that Jamerson mentioned, is evaluating during peak times. Does anyone else hire temporary evaluators, or what do other institutions do during the peak time to get evaluations done? And so we don't have students and parents screaming at us because we're taking too long.
Definitely. That's a great question. I put it in my little notes section. I'm going to forward that to Mark Booker and say, we've got our next session topic, because that is really, I think that's, I oversee our EDGE database, and we get a lot of folks who are looking for access to the database that are listed as temporary or seasonal registrars, meaning our seasonal admissions officers. And so I do think, to your question, that quite a few schools do hire temps during that season to get things moving and prevent the bottleneck. But it looks like the chat is pretty quiet. And we're about a minute out. So again, on behalf of AACRAO, to our panelists, thank you so much again for your time and for joining us and for really doing this last minute with us. You guys rock. And to all of our attendees who took some time out of their Friday afternoon, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our conversation and for engaging at the capacity that you could today. Again, please feel free to follow up with us either directly at AACRAO or with any of our panelists here using the emails listed below. And we really look forward to seeing you guys at our next TNA community practice meeting. Without final further ado, have a fantastic afternoon, everyone. And thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
All right,
Thanks.
thank you so much.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.